Man, I have a headband. I should have wore it. Sweat all in my eyes, all in my eye sockets. Anyhow, Flow the sequel. I actually had to adjust my flow. I was gonna shoot from my favorite spot over here, but this spot is many people's favorite spot. You can see the girls over there getting their photos in. So we'll walk and talk anyway. Flow the sequel. I guess I'm gonna talk about. My mom asked me about flow in politics, and I thought about making that a separate video, but maybe I'll throw it in here. But what I wanted to address were some issues that came up in the Reddit, and this is building off of yesterday's video, link below, if you happen to pop in here without having seen it. But let's go down to the temple. Like, there's a bunch of people there. I'm like, I'm gonna avoid that. I don't know how going to the temple is avoiding it. There's gonna be a bunch of people down there too, but it'll give me a moment to get my thoughts in order. So something that came up on Reddit. So I kind of talked about the flow and going with the flow, but then looking at it like that's not always the way to be. Maybe go against the flow sometimes, redirect it, jump out of the flow, whatever. Like, just so you have, multiple different ways to kind of look at going with the flow. Here, we'll get the 101. Here, lighting. I'm too black. Not that black. But so yeah, all these different angles and ways to look at going with the flow. So it isn't like just like I'm going with the flow, but that you sometimes don't want to go with the flow, etc. But I'm gonna put like 3 levels of going with the flow, or what that might mean. So at the highest level, like top down view, is everyone is always in a flow. Like, you can't not go with the flow. All your thoughts, how you move, how you respond, everything is a part of this, ocean flow, where in a sense you have no control. So there's this top layer flow that you're just always going in that flow, okay? So layer 2, we'll call this the human layer, where we're at. So that top down layer, that's weather and earthquakes and mountains and rain and the sun energy and water and clouds, whatever. So you got this top layer flow, boom. Then you got this middle layer flow, or this middle level flow, and we'll call that like the human flow. And that's kind of the flow I was talking about yesterday, where as you're developing awareness of larger flows and whatever, that you don't always want to just go with the flow. And the reason you don't want to just go with the flow is because your conception of the flow is, it's been manipulated by culture, cultural ideas, how you're raised and whatever. So in order to counter, your warped view of the world and your warped flow that we all have, and we're trying to like refine it, is I'll take you to the upstairs part, is that you don't want to accept the idea of just going with the flow. You don't want to accept that idea in the middle layer, because you're trying to develop awareness of the flow. You might be, like an easy one is if you're gay, like that's your nature, your internal nature, and you end up, here's the temple, and you end up needing to, here, I'll show you guys this a little bit. I'm just going to do a walk by. If you want me to do a longer temple video, I can. So yeah, you're gay, but you find yourself in a culture where being gay you can be murdered or something, right? Or you're just like in the U.S., you're raised very religious, and being gay just is a sin. And you have your own nature, and then you have the flow of the culture that you're in. And if you just go with that flow, there's real stories of men, women, whatever. They get married, and they try to force themselves They go with the flow in a way, and they end up in a situation they don't want to be in because I could. Here, I won't go all the way over there. This isn't a temple, whatever video, but I'll show you another little altar. There's maybe like 5 or 6 or 7 different altars at this temple. Shit, I lost where I'm at. Oh, anyway, gay, like a part of going with the flow is getting in touch with your essential nature, which is a long, hard process because, you've been culturalized and whatever, and it's really just figuring out, your unique talents from your genetics and like getting more open and letting go of things. So in the second layer, if I get back, while there's a big layer that you can't escape the flow because it's just constantly going, you're just in it, that's what it is. But then there's another layer, the human layer, as you develop awareness of this larger flow or different flows, in the process of getting to the third level, which I'll get into now, you have to go against the flow and redirect it. You don't want to just go with the flow because you're developing awareness, you're learning, you're figuring things out, right? So now we get to the third level, and this third level we could call maybe the highest level of going with the flow. And the third level is basically you've refined your innate abilities, you've refined your mind and your emotions, and you've refined your environment, or you're constantly refining your environment, and you really get tapped in to your original nature, combined with the top-down big flow, and you're able to basically, what I was calling yesterday as going against the flow or redirecting it, you do all that just effortlessly and automatically. So whether you're going against the flow, redirecting, harnessing, for you at that level, it's all now a part of just going with the flow. But that you can't just shortcut to that point. You can't just be like, I'm just gonna go with the flow immediately, because again, you'll end up being, obvious stuff. If you're in an abusive relationship, if you're in an oppressive regime, North Korea, if and you start getting awareness, so when you're there, you're just going with the flow. Maybe you get some awareness of this abusive relationship or oppressive regime, and you're like, oh, I got to get out of here. You're going to be going against the flow of that kind of environment that you're in. That environment has its own flow, and you're going to be going against it. You're going to be dodging it. You're going to be bobbing and weaving to elevate yourself. And then the highest level, the third level or whatever, is like you just kind of spontaneously, you're able to effortlessly and spontaneously adjust both your objective, both your dream and your flow, just constantly. So that's another layer of flow stuff. And then I'll throw in real quick my ma asking, and maybe I'll write a response as well to her comment, but she was asking about what about flow, and you look at political rallies like the Trump rallies or Bernie rallies or that white nationalist rally, or what's going on with the Dakota pipeline, and that kind of that human flow of like that. And I mean, really what that is I touched on it a little bit yesterday, but that's this, it's a part of the ideas, we all have our own experiences, culturalization, etc. We're humans, so humans naturally want to be a part of a tribe or a part of a group. That's just how we are designed. So politically, in the most, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm gonna pause for a second. In the most authentic you know, let's see, divine, I don't know what I'm looking at, good, the most good version of political movements would be people genuinely trying to elevate themselves and the collective consciousness of those around them, right? So, you know, maybe depending on your point of view, you might, you know, a person might be at the white power rally and that's what they're thinking. Their, you know, their senses might be a little bit warped, or, you know, a Bernie rally or the Dakota Pipeline. But, you know, with these movements, you know, people are, the best version of these movements, people are trying to elevate the collective consciousness of their communities and their states, their cities, their nations, etc. But the other side of politics is that you have people who are using the natural tendencies of humans to advance their personal agendas, and these personal agendas are probably, you know, fueled by desire and greed and, you know, and that sort of thing. So you have these, you know, kind of conflicting forces within these movements, right? Like some movements might be coming from a place of authenticity and wanting to protect the environment, or, you know, do better for humans, do better for animals. But then there are those who are, you know, influencing political movements for greed and, you know, personal gain, personal objectives. And I mean, that's really it. You know, people are going to naturally, you know, get involved in a political movement. And when I say naturally, like sometimes it's, I want to say almost, you know, forced. You know, what comes to mind is, I don't know, like Nazi camps and, you know, putting Jews. You know, there was a time when maybe, you know, people weren't doing anything, but then at some point you're like, oh shit, we got to do. Like nature will, even people who are like, I'm not political, you know, like the nature of man or societies will at some point, not for all people everywhere, but sometimes you'll get squeezed into like, oh no, I got to get political to protect my personal interests, my family, my friends. But ideally, you know, people have that feeling about their family and friends, that it's extended to their neighbors, it's extended to the environment, it's extended to animals. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my thought. It's my thought on flow. So there you go, a little bit flow. To recap, you got level 1, that there's just a flow that you're in, that we're all in. There's no control, there's no escaping. You got level 2, where you're in the, you know, human realm. Somebody's coming down hard with you're in the human realm. You have your own experiences, your own culture. Society flows in different ways, and you will have to, as you're developing higher awareness of the natural flow and a higher awareness of your internal nature, while you're doing that, you'll want to go against flow, redirect, harness, whatever. You don't always want to just go with the flow, because what you see as going with the flow is affected by how you've been culturalized, how you've been raised. So while you're figuring that out, you want to, you don't want to just automatically go with the flow. And then finally, the highest level is you are just going with the flow, and whether you go against it or whatever, it is, you know, a spontaneous response to, you know, the situation as it's been presented. So bing bang bong. But you want to focus on number 2. You want to focus on going against and you know, doing what you got to do to develop a greater awareness of the natural forces around and within you, and getting them all in alignment. And that process isn't just like, hey, I'm back to my run. Peace.